Welcome back, everyone, to the Human Role. We are now in season two, episode 9, where we're going to talk about work opportunity tax credit. So that's kind of what the acronyms is known as WOTC, WOTC, and it is a really good tax credit that is, really beneficial for employers and then also for potential employees. So before we get into that, I wanted to thank everyone, like always, for watching, liking, subscribing, commenting on past episodes. I hope that that continues. If there's anything specific that you need some insight on or would like for me to talk about, feel free to reach out and I will get that added to an upcoming episode. But let's talk about, let's take a little quick deeper dive into WOTC and what that specifically is for companies. So, work opportunity tax credit. It's a federal tax credit where employers can look to hire groups of employees, target groups of employees that face specific barriers when trying to seek employment. And so, in return, the government will help give back tax credit to employers for hiring these groups. With this program, it also helps lessen certain burdens of other governmental agencies. So we'll get into the specific target groups, as far as veterans and people who, are on food stamps or something of that nature in a little bit. But the more employers that partake into this program and support, hiring employees that may fall into one of these specific target groups, it really does help full suite other agencies. Also helps the employees because they do may experience harder times in getting hired elsewhere, and then you get tax credit back. So with that being said, also want to just give a little bit of more background on WOTC. So not sure when you'll be watching this specific video, but as of this moment, so we're in early 2024, this tax credit is available through the end of December of 2025. So that's the current law at this moment. So if you're watching years down the line, just check to see if it's been extended and is continuing to be offered, because there could be, certain changes along those lines. But at this current moment, it is available all the way through December of 2025. Hopefully, at that time, they will continue to extend it because it is a really good added benefit. But just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. And then all businesses can apply for this tax credit. So this is not applied to any specific company. It is not applied to any specific industry. It is open for all companies across all industries, no matter how small or how large your company may be. So keep that in mind. If your company is willing and able to offer employment to someone within the specific target group that we'll be talking about in a minute, I would say definitely seek out this potential, because it could really, really be very beneficial to all groups. So it could be beneficial to the employees that you're bringing on, but also to your company. You can get, pretty a good return on investment from a tax credit side, which is also a plus. So you may be curious as to what this specific target group is or who the specific target group is, right? And so this group consists of, there's about 10 different categories of employees that could potentially fall into this tax credit. So as we talk about, veterans, of course, are one. Employees that have been previously incarcerated are another group. Employees that are receiving some type of housing assistance program, employees that are a part of SNAP. So that's essentially food stamps. So the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Employees also that have been consistently on unemployment for at least like 27 weeks. So that's what, about like 6 months or so, over 6 months. They can also apply for this too. And there are definitely parameters. So I want to say, for someone who has been incarcerated, you have to hire them within like the first year of them coming out of prison or jail. So you want to definitely look over those specific details, right? I will leave a link in the comment section to the actual IRS website that shows all of the qualifications, because there are a long list, and then also there's like certain time frames for some of those specific groups, which is really important for you to take note of. And then, secondly, there's some more groups. So employees that are in rehabilitation services. So if you hire someone who's in that type of program, you can get tax credits back for that. There's other specific supplemental security income as well, that certain target groups are fall into. So just keep that in mind. Definitely pay attention to the link that I put from the IRS's website, because that will give you like a full long detail, and also the parameters that may fall within that specific group, right? So that way you're taking advantage of all of that and getting all the tax credits that you can get. From an employee stance, too, I also want to mention, especially from like an applicant stance, because the time we're in now, let's be honest, there's a lot of people looking for jobs and applying. And so I don't want people to get nervous if they start seeing these questions come up on applications and have that deter them from actually applying to that specific job. So just so you're aware, there are certain applications that may ask you, have you previously been incarcerated? Are you a veteran? Have you been on this specific program, food stamps or housing program for 6 months to a year or whatever? And that may actually turn an employee away. They may get scared, or they may try to lie about it, which you also don't want to do. So just don't be alarmed if you're an employee who is, or if you're an applicant looking for a job and you see these questions pop up on your application. Definitely make sure you're filling those out appropriately, because this could also help your company, and it might not be a negative thing. It might actually be a plus to the company, right? As they're looking to hire, they may not turn you away. It could just definitely add to their company getting an actual tax credit. So you don't want to be misleading in any way, of course, because if the company is using a certain system on the back end through their provider, HCM provider, and they're spot checking all employees, then something could come up later, and that definitely wouldn't work out well for you if you're not being truthful on the application. So just keep that in mind when you see those questions come up. It's not necessarily that anyone is trying to X you out from the application if you have to answer yes to some of those things. It's definitely just because they're trying to gather information early on, so that they meet the requirements when they go and submit for these tax credits. So don't worry about that, in any way, shape, or form. But that's our target group. Of course, veterans definitely apply to that. Any person with a prior, felony, any person on food stamps and so forth. Also, anyone who has been unemployed for quite some time, which unfortunately in today's day and age may not be too far left, I guess you can say. So look into getting these specifically added. And that will lead me to, my next topic. I want to talk about, how does this even work? How do you even get started? How do you even explore this? So there are some rules that go along with this. So I want to just make clear, you definitely have to have employees fill out these questions on or before an offer letter is sent through. So just keep that in mind. That's why what I just talked about, employees seeing this or applicants seeing this when they're applying, most companies that are using this method to try to get, tax credits back, they're getting those questions in early on because it is an actual requirement, right? So you have to get these answers for the tax credits completed by the employee on or before you send through the offer letter. Otherwise, it does not work. So keep that in mind. You do have to go through a pre-screening program. So the state workforce agency has to go, pre-screen, make sure that those employees do actually fall in line to these specific target groups, that you do have to go through that specific pre-screen. And then after all of that has been done, in 28 calendar days, you have to send through the form 8850, which is the IRS form. And then there's a separate SWA form. So the state workforce agency, there's separate 961 or 962 forms that you have to send through to them. So this is probably, by this time, my HR and payroll people are probably like, okay, no, it's a no for me, right? Because you already have so much on your plate. Who wants to add something else on your plate? But this is why I mentioned early on to look into maybe reaching out to your salesperson at your HCM provider site. So we're talking about the ADPs, the Workdays, the UKG, Ceridian, Oracle. For sure, those groups, and I know a couple of those that I named already, definitely have a separate WOTC department on their side that will handle all of this for you. So I would say to look into that first, because that could definitely be really, really beneficial for your company if you already have them handling it. And then also your team doesn't have to take on that actual burden. That could really solve what you're worried about already. So there we go. Already kind of hopefully have a resolution. Hopefully it's not too overly expensive. Because if not, then unfortunately, yes, this would fall on your team's plate. And it would be something within those specific deadlines that you'd have to send through. And then you're talking about more IRS forms that have to be filled out appropriately. But if you do get approval from your executives to potentially purchase this module with your HCM providers, the tax credits could be pretty beneficial, right? And so I would definitely recommend looking into it, right? Recommend just kind of exploring it to kind of see what the cost potentially is and then how much potential money you could have. So, another thing, you really want to make sure that you have a target audience for the target group. So, what type of industry your company is in, and if this specific group would even fall into your specific industry, because you don't want to go and get approval to purchase, a WOTC module within your HCM provider and then not have any employees that apply. But I will say, if you look over the list and the link that I'll leave, someone's going to potentially fall into it, especially with the economy we're at right now. And when you talk about the unemployment one, that someone has to collect unemployment consistently for 27 weeks. I mean, at this current moment, unfortunately, that's not necessarily overly far fetched. So I would just say it's at least worth exploring and, could really be beneficial for your company. One thing I also like to say is that in the payroll and HRC, we're not necessarily known to like bring in the bacon per se. I know I mentioned that in, a couple of past episodes. What I would really, really, recommend is that, we're not sales, we're not helping generate a lot of revenue, but we are paying that revenue, making sure the bacon is flowing properly and people are happy with their pay and, with the HR and company. But any chance we get to help like bring back money to the company, I think is always really good. So I would say to absolutely just look into it as much as you can because the tax credits can be definitely really beneficial. And with that, you may be asking, well, what's the tax credit? Right. So the highest tax credit is 9,600. Yes, $9,600 per employee. And as mentioned earlier, too, there is no cap on how much money a company can bring in from this tax credit. There's a cap on a per employee stance, but there's not a cap on a company as a whole stance, right? So per employee, there could potentially be a cap of 9,600 for a specific individual employee, but there's no cap on how many employees and no cap on an actual dollar amount. So when we think about, there are some programs where it's like, okay, you can collect this much money up to like 50,000 or 100,000. That's not the case. You can collect this amount of money for all employees without any cap. So that could really, really be beneficial. And then the specific, tax credits, there's other stipulations with them. In the link that I leave you from the IRS website, you'll also see the different breakdowns on the dollar amounts. 9,600 is a very high level amount that goes over a course of, I want to say, like 2 years or so. Also, there's an hours work cap as well. So the employee, in order to at least get that much money, the employee has to at least work up to 400 hours to get the minimum amount, which is typically around like $2,400. The employee at least has to work 120 hours, 120, 125 in between a 400-hour range. So just keep that in mind too, that there is an hours cap on how much an employee, at least hours minimum, at least on how much an employee has to work for you to get that dollar amount. And then it's a certain percentage. Like if an employee works up to 400 hours, the company can get 40% of that employee's wages. And then if an employee at least works 120 hours, then you get 25% of that employee's qualified wages, right? So there are different breakdowns for each specific one that you definitely want to keep in mind. And then each target group has, and dependent upon how many hours that target group works, those tax credits are different. So you'll definitely see that listed out. So it's not going to be, hey, look, you hire this person and then within like a net 30 or net 60, you're going to get all this money. No, that's not the case, right? So obviously the employee has to work a certain amount of hours. You need to retain the employee. You have to follow those specific processes but then the money in return could come, a year later, 2 years later. So definitely keep that in mind. It's not going to just happen overnight, but it definitely can happen. It definitely is beneficial, and it's something to help the government, but also to help the group, these specific groups of employees that are struggling to find work, right? And are constantly hit with certain barriers. This is just something where it's like, hey, look, you help them out, you help the company out, you feel good as well. And so it all comes full circle, right? And just, being helpful to people is the key to life. So wanted to just give you all that background story on WOTC. Some of you may already heard about it. Some of you may already know about it. Of course, this was a brief, run through of that, but you have to make sure, just as a recap, you have to make sure that you have the employees fill out these specific questions on or before you send over the offer letter. So just keep that in mind. And then after an employee starts, you have 28 calendar days to send over all of these forms. So the 8850 form, the 9061, and or the 9062 form. And then, from there, of course, the employee has to keep up with their specific hours, making sure there's an hours tracking how many hours they're working. So that's why I would recommend to have this go through your HCM provider. For example, if your HCM provider charges maybe $1,000 a month or $1,000 a year, if you look at the potential ROI, if you're going to definitely be like mass hiring and bringing people in, and then, you're getting 2,500, 3,000, 9,600, or so forth, the ROI on that, like the return on investment on that is great, right? And so you're getting money back. So it's pretty much a wash, right? And it is really beneficial. You're hiring people that would be so happy to be hired, and you're able to show the company that you're bringing money back. So that always helps us. I always want to help our payroll and HR people because we definitely deserve it. We got to pat ourselves on the back whenever we can. So I wanted to bring this gem to you all. So that being said, hope you all got some good added insight. If you were not aware of WOTC, the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, I'll definitely leave the IRS link in the comment section. And next up, I will be talking about neurodiversity in the workplace. So I'm really, really excited about this next episode and this next guest. She just knows so much about this specific area in the industry that I had not really explored much. So it's really a fascinating topic to talk about, especially for companies who are wanting their employees to be in the office. So please look out for that episode. It'll be coming in the next couple of weeks. If you have any other, thing that you want to see me talk about, please feel free to reach out to me directly or leave a note in the comments. But thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, see you soon. Bye.